Welcome to the Sustainable Travel Podcast. I'm Emma, your host from That Travel, and today I am here with Eva from Eva and the Planet. This is a podcast that interviews a range of different travelers from different backgrounds to see what sustainable travel means to them. Eva is a vegan content creator and group trip host who is currently living in Southeast Asia, and today we're going to be talking about the issue of plastic usage worldwide, which is a really good topic for Plastic Free July, as we've just said, particularly in Southeast Asia. Hi, Eva.
Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for inviting me. So excited to be on your podcast.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to have you. I know we've been talking about this for quite a long time now. It's been in the works, and I think it's like coming out at exactly the right time, given that it's Plastic Free July.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that we just scheduled it in the perfect month
I
and it
know
wasn't
it's
even planned.
it's like divine providence. But tell us
Yeah.
a little bit more about you, Eva, and how you came to be interested in sustainable travel, and just what it is that you do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm Eva. I'm originally from Germany. And a few years ago, I decided to leave my life behind in Germany. So I completely gave up everything, my apartment, my old job, and moved over to Southeast Asia. And I've been living here nomadically. I mean, I do spend a lot of time in Thailand, which is my absolute favorite country here. But I've seen a bunch of different countries throughout the years. And my love for Southeast Asia basically started in 2014 when I went on my very first backpacking trip to Thailand. And I think that trip also was like a huge turning point in my travel career and just in my life in general, because I used to go on these typical four-star package hotel trips to Turkey or other destinations in Europe that were just really popular for Germans. And then that was my very first trip, like where I said to my sister, I think we should go see the world and do something different. And yeah, we went on this backpacking trip and diving into a completely different culture and really seeing how people live on a different continent, different foods. Yeah, just like also the way people are, and you see all this beautiful nature just really opened up an entire new world for me. And the more the more and more I came to Southeast Asia throughout these last 11 years, I almost came almost every year to Thailand or other countries like Indonesia. But then you start also seeing the problems, right? You see the plastic pollution, which is a huge, huge issue in Southeast Asia. So you, like me as a person, I just started to kind of try to connect the dots and, try to understand, well, how does my consumption in Germany even have an effect on Southeast Asian countries, where we can, of course, talk about today,
Yeah.
because they do have an effect on these countries, our consumption in the West. I just think seeing these problems really made me way more aware about this global issue of plastic pollution.
Mm. And I think that's a really important point to make is like we're obviously going to be talking about plastic consumption. You're from Germany, I'm from the UK, and we're talking about plastic consumption in a t totally different continent from where we come from, right? It's kind of like, well, why are you two talking about this? But I think that point you made there is so valid and so important that it is what we do in the global north that is affecting other regions. Like, we don't get to duck out of this one and say it's not our problem because it is our problem. Things are happening all over the world that we are a part of, and that's leading to this crisis. So, really, really good point. I mean, in terms of Southeast Asia, it's so popular at the moment. I see it like all over my feed. It seems like every traveler has to go through a rite of passage to go to Southeast Asia to do that backpacking trip that maybe you were talking about, maybe a different kind of trip. What's your experience of tourism there and kind of how tourists, I guess, behave, like both the benefits and the maybe negative impact that tourism is having?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say Southeast Asia was already very popular even when I went, right? In 2014, it was already, I had friends already been to Thailand or Bali. I guess Thailand and Bali were like the most common places, even though Bali is just an island. Obviously, it's not a country, part of Indonesia. And yeah, but with social media, I think that just created such an influx because it was way more out there in the world and people could just see all these amazing landscapes. Because I do feel like the number one thing is the beautiful landscapes. You have these incredible beaches. If I think about Thailand, you have these limestone rock formations, which are very unique. I mean, you have them in Vietnam as well, but you can't find them like everywhere, right? So it's really all about landscapes. Then there's a lot of wildlife tourism, right? There's like the elephants, which is a huge thing in Southeast Asia, mainly in Thailand. And then I do think it is quite affordable. It's like a quite affordable region. So I I think that makes it just very popular with young backpackers. I mean, me including, when I went backpacking, I had like, of course, a lower budget than I might have now, but it was really affordable and easy to travel around different countries in Southeast Asia. So I think these are like the main factors that make it so, so popular. And I guess the more younger people go there, the more maybe want to go because they know they'll meet people in their age group and they can just have a lot of fun together.
Yeah.
They, yeah,
Yeah, I did the same thing, to be honest. Like I
yeah,
went to Southeast Asia with an ex-boyfriend. Wasn't that young, I say I was like 26 or something. And like you said, for me it was very affordable. Like it was well within the price range that I could like go backpacking, see all these things I'd never seen before. Like it's so different from what we have in Europe. Like at the time, I had I had lived abroad. I had lived in Tanzania actually, but still for me, this was a completely different world. It's a totally different continent, it's a totally different experience. In Tanzania, I was backpacking, but it was very difficult to get around. The transport system is not quite as easy as it is in Thailand and Vietnam. And then I could go to Thailand, Vietnam on, as you said, a very limited budget and get around to all these places, do like the same length of travel that I would have been able to do in Europe, that I would have had to spend so much more on. And I think you're completely right. I think this is what brings young people in particular to this region. But unfortunately, I think that a lot of young people aren't necessarily aware of their impact as tourists. And I include myself in that. I had no idea what I was doing. I just thought this is great fun, everybody's so nice, like they're just welcoming me. And I do think unfortunately this can have some benefits like with the money that they bring, but it can also have some real downsides as well, don't you think?
for sure. And yeah, I can also just say, when I went, I was also actually 26 and I also didn't really think about a lot of things, right? I was there, I was amazed by everything, the landscapes, the food, the kindness of the locals just being so different than what I know from Europe or from Germany.
Mm.
But I totally agree. It's always I always ask myself, like, was this place better off before tourism or after, right? It's like this on you can go on with that debate forever and you probably will never find a solution because it brings a lot of good things, but it also brings a lot of problems. And yeah, I think because it's so popular now, the more people come, the more trash gets produced, right? So if I always now have to think about Gili Trawangan, which is in Indonesia, and I've been to that landfill twice.
Mm.
They have this massive landfill in the middle of the island. It's an area where a lot of tourists don't even go because they stay by the beach, that's where most of the hotels are, the beach clubs, everything, right? And I feel like that is something everyone should actually see because it's such a hidden thing and you come on your trip, you drink a lot of alcohol, you potentially have a lot of takeout food, like all these different things just produce so much trash. I mean, they've been telling me that island, it's a small, small, small island. They produce 20 tons of trash every single day. Like I was like, that can't be right. I
Mm.
mean, it's such a huge amount, and they do have some kind of recycling facility now, but still a lot of trash ends up in the landfill because a lot of materials are also not recyclable, which is also something I learned on Gili Travangan on that tour. So I think the trash production and then but also, nature gets destroyed. If I think about Maya Bay, which is a very popular bay in Thailand, and they already had to close it down several times because the coral reefs got completely destroyed. The sharks basically left the bay. It used to be, like a breeding area of blacktip reef sharks.
Yeah.
And I think COVID was like the best thing that could have happened to, I mean, many places in the world, but also Maya Bay specifically. Then the whole ocean system really started to recover, and the sharks came back, and suddenly there were baby sharks again. And I think they changed it to not allowing the boats into the bay. I
Mm.
think they used to do that, and people could actually, get off the boat, like basically in the bay, and then walk to the beach. I think now they kind of have to like go around. Still a lot of people going there, but at least they forbid to swim in it.
Mm.
So I think with the popularity comes a lot of mass tourism in specific places.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Mm. It's such a good point. I think often we look at like tourism and we go, that's bad because that's doing this. And it's not, in my opinion, tourism that's the problem. It's mass tourism. Like when you
yeah.
have anything on mass, I mean, you're an environmentalist, like maybe you agree with this. Like I think when you have anything on a massive scale, it is detrimental. Like we overconsume, we do things to excess, and that is always going to bring problems. Like one of the examples that you gave was the wildlife. You said that's a reason that people come to Asia, and I completely agree. It was a huge appeal for me, in particular, the elephants. I love elephants, and we've done podcasts about this in the past on here. But one of the things that has come with tourism is a change in the elephant industry. So obviously they stopped logging and they switched it to tourism. And it's not tourism that's the reason that elephants get mistreated in Asia, but they are perpetuating the issue by constantly demanding these experiences and demanding so many of them when really like there's not that many elephants in the world. Like they should be kind of left to be wild.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think social media also plays a big role
Yeah.
in that entire elephant situation. I know we talked about it already on Instagram in the DMs. I think because it got so popular on social media to take selfies with elephants, to feed them. And of course, it looks cute and great, but there is just not enough like information about what that actually does to the elephants and how that's a lot of stress for them. And then of course you have all these sanctuaries that call themselves sanctuaries and then they're not real sanctuaries. And I
Yeah.
mean that's just of course difficult for the tourist or let's say the consumer in general. You always have to do so much research on your
Yeah.
own, right? Like it's like you can't really trust anything anymore. And I think, yeah, I mean, also, but when I went to that sanctuary back then, I was like, okay, great, it's a sanctuary.
Yeah.
So I'm not riding an elephant. I mean, I already kind of knew riding elephants is a bad thing
Yeah.
11 years ago. But then I went to the sanctuary and, looking back now, it's like, I can't believe, I cuddled with elephants when they're huge wild animals.
Yeah. And so
I
dangerous.
bathed them and so dangerous. I've watched podcasts about it from biologists. They say like they can crush you in a second if they
Yeah.
want to. They
Yeah.
they really can. And you're just yeah, people just don't understand that or they just don't know, right? They just don't know how dangerous an elephant can actually be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess this is somewhat of a sidetrack, but this is also
Yeah.
a byproduct, I suppose, of visiting a country whose culture is super hospitable. And with this, maybe we're talking about Thailand, maybe Indonesia, maybe Vietnam. Like all these places have very hospitable cultures that like really look after guests. And when you have loads and loads of tourists going to a country or an area of the world like this and demanding experiences, I've seen this from Thai influencers as well, that the culture is just to say, okay, like we'll provide that for you. And, how true that is, I'm not sure. I'd need to do more research, but like it's interesting, isn't it, that you said quite rightly there that a lot of onus comes onto the consumer. We have to do so much research, but it's extremely complicated when you've got kind of people trying to serve and help, and then the tourists coming and just wanting to go along with the culture, whatever's done, and not realizing that actually the culture is kind of accommodating them. It's so
Yeah.
difficult to get it right, and everybody really is kind of trying to do their best, but there's a lot of issues caused.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you said, the if we take Thailand as an example, they just yeah, they just want to create like the best experience for the tourists and that yeah, that's like their main goal in the tourism industry. And then of course the people come and they demand the elephant how do you say like the elephant not necessary rides. I mean, I know the rides are still a thing, but just like an experience with an elephant, right? Or other wildlife.
Mm. Yeah, and they
Yeah.
feel they have to oblige. But so the first
Yeah.
thing you mentioned was the plastic, and I think this is an issue that's like it's visible. We can see it. Like I think most people when they visit Southeast Asia will come back and say, God, I could not believe how much plastic was used. Like I couldn't believe every time I got a drink, I'd be given a plastic cup in a plastic bag, or takeaway containers were like styrofoam with plastic bag on top with plastic cutlery. And I hear this a lot. And I'm sure that you do see it as well when you're there. So if you could give us like a general overview? You said you've seen the landfill on Gili Travangan, but like what is the general feeling on plastic over there? What's the situation? You obviously see this every day.
Yeah. I mean, it is used a lot every single day. It doesn't even matter which country you go to, what you just said. You go to a market, you get a drink, it's in a plastic cup, the straw, the extra bag. And I mean, I've seen a bunch of documentaries about it, and it's really like people just like it out of convenience. You know, it is, I mean, it is a really convenient thing to get everything in like these little takeaway boxes. And then I think one of the biggest polluters here, though, is they call it sachets. It's like these really small packages, right? So they have a lot of different things in these small sachets, like shampoo, soap, coffee, like almost anything. And what I learned when I was here is that creating these small packages have really helped a lot of local people in like a lower income class to have access to certain items and goods because like in Europe we might be used to buying like a big bottle of detergent or shampoo or something like that, but that is just not affordable then for them to buy it in like such a big bottle.
Mm.
So it was really helpful for a lot of locals, and it doesn't even matter which country you go to here in Southeast Asia, that they had access to all of this. And then on top of that, I know in Indonesia, for example, they drink a lot of coffee and they all drink the instant coffee.
Mm.
And the instant coffee is always in these small sachets. Like
Mm.
it's either the square ones or it's like these longer ones. And then they drink, I don't know, 10 coffees per day. Like they drink a lot of coffee in Indonesia.
Mm.
And every single time it's a sachet. And that's also what the tour leader, when I was on Gili Travangan doing the recycling tour, said. And on the beach cleanup, the sachets are one of the biggest polluters
Mm.
in Southeast Asia. And then the next one is the styrofoam boxes.
Mm.
So the takeaway boxes are also a huge, huge problem, which I think it's a mix between like locals using them, but also a lot of tourists. Or if I think about the digital nomads or the foreigners, you know, living on Bali or anywhere else in Southeast Asia, they order in so much food on a daily basis
Mm.
because people say, yeah, it's amazing, it's so easy with a grab, it just comes to your doorstep.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really easy and convenient,
Yeah.
but if it comes in these styrofoam packages, they're the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Like Shan, who is the head on Gili Travangan of the Debris Free Friday project, she said, you know, when you see it at the beach, they they break up in these like tiny particles, and
Yeah.
it's so difficult to even pick them up. Like you do a beach clean, and they kind of like blend in together with the sand. And she said, they float around in the ocean. The turtles will eat them,
Mm.
or a bigger fish. Like it's really, yeah. The I would say those two are like the two like the two main polluters. And yeah, the main thing is the convenience. It's just convenient to have everything as takeaway, and I think it's just normal. Like they've been doing that for decades, going to the markets, you get everything in plastic.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I think it's convenience, but also like when you're talking about digital nomads, like it could be cost
yeah.
because like maybe for them they're like, well, I what a life. Like I get to live in Thailand or Vietnam and have takeaway every day because it's quote unquote so cheap and I can afford it and like it's for me it's great because I'm getting this like fresh, healthy Thai food delivered to me. Maybe it's not fresh and healthy, I don't know, but it's like delivered, it's convenient. I don't have to worry about cooking. And I don't have to worry about cleanup because I can just take it from this plastic container, eat it. It costs me next to nothing. It's less than what I would pay in Europe. And, they just don't necessarily think it's a problem because their wallet isn't suffering.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think because the even if you order food from, I'll say, a more Western restaurant, like, a salad bowl or something like that, everything is available in takeaway. And, of course it's affordable, it's yeah, quote unquote, it's cheap,
Yeah.
and people perhaps are working in the co-working space or they're in their villas, and then yeah, you're just working, and then easy the food just comes to your doorstep. And I think also there is just pure convenience and affordability for them,
Mm.
but then perhaps not thinking about how much trash that actually produces. And then if if I think about Bali, so many people complain about the trash. The Bali is like, of course, it's a huge, huge problem there. But then I sometimes feel like the majority of people don't even understand, that they're part of the whole problem. They always I feel like always it's like, ah, yeah, the tourists that come, but also the people that live there and perhaps do take away every day. I mean, they're contributing to the problem too.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to that. But the other thing that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned was kind of the small microplastics that break up from styrofoam. I don't think people
Yeah.
realize microplastics are in absolutely everything. Um, but like I wanted to add, like that's also really bad for our health. Like what we consume often comes from, I mean, I know this is a really scary topic, so I'm just gonna like preface this because I think people get a bit triggered by it. But with microplastics, like they get into what we eat because if you're eating styrofoam, like you said, it doesn't take much for it to like start to crumble, to break apart that does rub off into the food that we eat, especially because the food that we eat is usually warm, which means that those kind of containers can degrade. And of course, it takes years and years for microplastics to have an effect. But if you think about it, there are sea creatures like turtles, like whales, that live a lot longer than we do, which, you know, by the end of their lives, like their whole stomachs might be full of these microplastics. And ultimately, like it does come to us eventually as well, you know? It's not great.
No, and that, yeah, I think especially, I mean, I wouldn't say it doesn't even matter if you're vegan or not. I mean, we probably consume microplastic also in certain ways. But of course, I think especially with fish,
Mm,
with all the microplastic floating around in the ocean,
yeah.
the fish, I think they're probably all contaminated. And
Yeah.
people don't even understand that. And yeah, I saw the documentary about it, and it's a huge issue, es- especially in Southeast Asia, but perhaps a worldwide problem because we have ocean floating around. Sorry, we have plastic floating around in the ocean everywhere, not just in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And it's part of people's daily diet, especially here.
Yeah.
Like it's so normal for them, especially if they live in coastal areas, to eat fish every day. And the probability is most likely very high that they consume microplastic every day. And I
Mhm.
mean, if you want to go even scarier, I also learned in that documentary that you even breathe it. It's like it's already in the air.
Mm.
So yeah, it the whole I think microplastic topic is a whole nother really scary thing.
Yeah.
I think we all need to learn more about and how that might really affect us in the future.
Yeah, and people do get very triggered by it. Like I've seen people kind of be like,
Yeah.
I've even had conversations with people where they are environmentalists and they've said, I can't even think about it. It just freaks me out so much, like
Yeah.
considering it. And then it is scary, and I don't want to kind of bring doom to the podcast and frighten people. But with fish in particular, I think that's a great point because they aren't actively looking out for these objects and thinking, well, better avoid that. They're just, they take it in because they don't know what it is. We're humans, we're a bit more cognizant of it. If we see a plastic bottle cap or something, we're not going to go ahead and eat it, but they might if they're bigger and they don't know what it is. So yeah, this is also an issue. So I think we've covered like really well why it's an issue specifically in Southeast Asia. Obviously, the plastic production over there is really enormous, and I think both for kind of cost and convenience, there's a lot going on there. Um, but kind of worldwide, do you think this is as much of an issue, or is the rest of the world kind of doing more to combat this? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Like I thought about this a lot, or I've thought about it a lot in the past, and I sometimes think if we don't have completely different materials, I think the problem is not gonna go away.
Mm,
Because I mean, I think it is a huge problem no matter where you go and which country you look into. I mean, if I think about Germany, going to the supermarket in Germany, half of everything is in plastic, right? Like, unless you maybe go to an organic supermarket or you go to a shop where you can do your refills, like a zero waste shop. But these are oftentimes also more expensive. So the majority of the Germans will go to the supermarkets where vegetables and groceries are cheaper, especially in the economic situation we're living in right now. So I feel like the consumption is just not going to go away. There will always be people who are more conscious and who are going to try their best. And of course, we're like, if I think about you and me, I mean, we're trying to, raise awareness online about these kind of topics. But on a larger scale, I think we really need new materials that will degrade on its own. And I know there's always, there's news about so I feel like I just recently saw like a headline. There's something in Japan now that they created something that degrades on its own, which is amazing. But then you need to make that accessible worldwide, right? And you need to, I guess it also needs to be able to be produced as cheap as plastic. I guess that's also why it is such a worldwide usage. It's cheap to produce, it's very durable.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. I have a lot to say about this, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I feel first it's really important to point out that when we're talking about Southeast Asia and the fact that they use a lot of plastic, it is also really important to point out that a lot of the rest of the world like either sells its plastic waste to Asia in general, or like we might not mean to litter, but sometimes things fall out of bins. Sometimes things get to beaches and coastal areas and end up in the sea. And like, guess what? The sea goes all the way around the world, which can mean that it ends up in places towards the east where the currents go. Like it's one of
Yeah.
these things where unfortunately, in my opinion, like we aren't exempt. And like you said, like we are using plastic all the time. Like I mean, isn't it there's a stat I think that like 90% of the plastic waste in the world comes from like these seven main rivers. Like this might be not completely the correct fact, but this is what Murray was telling me. And that is those rivers are not like all in Southeast Asia. They're not all in China or wherever you want to say that there's a lot of plastic. Like it's definitely a global issue. And I agree with you. I think that until governments and companies make some kind of material, come up with a solution that is as cheap or accessible as plastic, then we're not, I don't want to say we're not going to get anywhere because that's not a very positive outlook at all, but like I do think the problem will persist.
Yeah, 100%. I think the the human being likes to, at least that's how I think it, we like to do things the way we've always kind of done them. You know,
Yeah,
there's some who say, okay, I'm going to try and change my behaviors, but I think the average population will continue using plastic the way it's been used now for decades. And yeah, what you said, I mean, a lot of countries are shipping their plastic to Southeast Asia, in particular to Thailand, Indonesia, and like Germany is like one of, yeah, it's all the way on the top there.
yeah,
And then yeah, and as a German, I mean, I don't live in Germany anymore, but you know, I used to live in Germany, and if I think about all the trash that I produce, it's insane how much, if you just do your weekly groceries and if you're maybe tight on a budget, then you will have so much plastic waste. And
yeah,
then perhaps a third of that, I mean, I don't know the specific number right now, but you know, a proportion of that just goes to Southeast Asia. And then I go there on holiday and perhaps complain about there's so much plastic laying around on the beach. Like it's all so connected.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
we can't really just like look at one thing or the other thing. Like it's just so connected on the entire globe.
Yeah, and it like you said, it's kind of rude when people go to Bali and they're like, ugh, like plastic. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's on the beaches. Yeah, well, like maybe you had some part in that, like even if you've never been to Bali, even if you've never like if you didn't use any plastic in Bali, like maybe you had an impact on that in your home country. It's really important. And, when we talk about countries like Germany, like the UK, Germany in particular, I know has like a really advanced recycling system, more advanced than the UK, shamefully. But in the UK, we do recycle. We are supposed to separate our plastics from metals, glass, and that kind of thing. But still, only 9% of UK plastic waste, I don't know how it translates globally, but only 9% is recycled. And a lot of that is down to the way that we are educated about plastic recycling. Like people don't know that you need to clean things out. People don't know what kind of plastic can be recycled. And also, a lot of this falls to corporations who make this extremely complicated and produce these plastic bottles that can't be recycled because of the way that they are shaped or the type of plastic that's used. And there's no instructions on recycling bins. It's really hard.
It's so hard. And you know, I thought as yeah, growing up in Germany, I already kind of know a little bit about recycling, but then I'm dating a person from Sweden. So my partner is from Sweden, and Sweden is really, they're so good at recycling. I mean, they even import trash. So, and when I went to Sweden for the first time last summer, I was so impressed by
Yeah.
these like stations. I mean, he said they don't have them everywhere in each like apartment complex, but the one we were staying in, we went into that house with all the different bins and it was unbelievable. I mean, you know, if you think about having like 3 to 4 bins in Germany, there you have like three different for like paper and three different for plastic. And
Wow.
then you have the food waste, you have like something for batteries, electronics. It's like incredible what they have there for like the average person who can just go out and bring that into the different bins. And he said he really learned that when he was growing up. And
Wow.
of course, again, you can't speak for like the entirety of Sweden, but his parents taught him like you need to clean out like the Tetra packs, right? So you need to
Mm.
wash that. He's like, you need to wash them. Like I went through school again in Sweden. He's like, you need to wash them out. Then you like dry them. And then he's like, you fold them in a certain way so you can really like
Wow.
stack them up. It's yeah, so it's all about education in the end, and but then also having the facilities for
Mm.
it,
Yeah.
which then, yeah,
Yeah, education intersects with accessibility, intersects with
yes.
like having like, a different form of accessibility, having facilities available. You are so right. Yeah, I mean, with all of this, it's very, very difficult because education is not widespread. But I do think I will say, so there isn't kind of all gloomy. Like, I think there are ways that we can, like, one, lobby for this, like, let governments know that we want these recycling facilities. And like I've said a few times, I understand that it is an overwhelming topic, but those kind of swaps that you make, like maybe, I'll take my reusable water bottle with a filter next time I go to Southeast Asia. Maybe I'll take a coffee cup because like coffee cups have plastic on the inner lining. If you can do like one swap a week, I do think sometimes it becomes a lot less overwhelming and it does have an impact.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if we just start with changing one little thing and then perhaps we realize, okay, this is not so difficult, and
Mm,
then maybe we change another thing. I mean, I think if you talk about traveling, the easiest and the best thing you can do is bring a reusable water bottle.
mm,
And I do feel like more and more also hotels and guest houses and homestays in Southeast Asia are now offering water refills, which is
nice.
incredible because they do have these big 20-liter jugs. And also, if you live here, I mean, that's the first thing we always try to organize, like
Yeah.
having these 20-liter jugs, because we don't want to. I mean, unfortunately, you can't drink the water from the tap. So you are kind of dependent on filtered water
Yeah.
in a plastic bottle. But having a 20-liter refillable jug is so much better than going to 7-Eleven and buying all these individual 1.5-liter bottles, or perhaps they have these 5-liter jugs, which of course are already better than than the individual bottles. But yeah,
Mm,
overall, it's just incredible that there is a shift
yeah.
towards having a water station. And when there, to be honest, when there's none, I always tell the hotel, I'm like, you
Yeah.
should
Good.
think about this, it's really it's like people really want that. And I remember that one hotel, I told them, they're like, ah, yeah, somebody else said that like a few weeks ago. And so I think the more, of course, the more people say, like, hey, this would be incredible if you had that here, then the more they hear it, I think that will create change.
Yeah, definitely. And let's not forget as well that you can get like water bottles with a filter in. They are more expensive, I
Yeah.
will say, but the investment I think is very worth it if you travel a lot. Like it saves you a lot on buying plastic bottles too. And this of course is another thing like when we're doing these individual actions, the ultimate aim is to make corporations and governments understand that hey, we're not going to pay for this anymore. So if you want our money, like you have to follow our consumer trends. Yeah.
Mm. The only thing I've been observing is I feel like it's more the tourists that carry around the reusable water bottles. Like rather like the locals don't really do that. I don't want to say none of the locals here have reusable water bottles, but it to me from like what I'm seeing outside on the streets, it's not very common. They
Yeah.
still buy, the plastic bottles, the small ones. The worst are also these. They're very typical. I see them in Thailand, in Indonesia a lot, probably also the other countries, but it's like these really small, maybe 100, 150 milliliters maximum. Then they have that little lid and you have to like punch in the straw.
Mm.
And like these small ones, they have them everywhere in the hospitals, in like
Yeah.
I recently went to a chiropractor. He had those like standing around. So it's maybe the
Oh.
chiropractor. When I go back, I'm gonna tell him like, look, why don't you guys have a refiller here?
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's hard, and that I mean that also could be to
Yeah.
do with accessibility of cost, like you said. So
Yeah.
it's super difficult. But is there a way that you think tourists can help with this, like in either in general or like you said with the feedback, like specific actions?
Yeah, I think especially if you're, I would say if you're on an island, there will probably be some kind of beach cleanup. So I think that's like the first thing you can look for if there's an organized beach cleanup. I know for certain on Gili Travangan, there's Debris Free Friday. That happens every Friday. It's run by Sean. She's amazing. She's really knowledgeable. I learned so much from her about the plastic and the waste issues in Indonesia. Yeah, and there you learn a lot and you do something good. You'll clean up for an hour or two. And I know for sure that also happens on Thai islands. I bet that also exists in the Philippines, like anywhere in where there's when it's popular islands where a lot of tourists go. I think a beach cleanup is something amazing to give back
Mm,
for the communities. And then obviously think about your consumption, right? Like think about if is that really necessary to get everything as a takeout or have the straws. I mean, it's also so easy to bring a reusable straw. And I know we like to drink all the fruit shakes because they're incredible and they're so tasty, or the coconuts. But of course, they always come with a straw, or sometimes you even get two straws if you share a shake.
yeah.
Yeah, instead of one. So I think it's like also small things. If everyone would do them, I think it would definitely help with creating less waste.
Yeah, I think for myself as well, something else is just kind of like be a bit aware of the challenges because I often see people go to Southeast Asia, like I said at the beginning, and they'll come back and say, God, I couldn't believe, the amount of plastic, like so much. And there's me thinking like it is quite well known. I don't know, like maybe this is just like in the circles I run in or like the content I consume, but like I feel like I see this being discussed a lot. So when people go and they come back and they're kind of so shocked, I'm like, yeah, I mean, like that information is out there. And like, not to say that you should have known, but researching this kind of thing and like finding it out in advance is a really great way to go prepared with these things like bottles, like cups, and kind of help the local populations in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, the coffee, like a coffee mug is also great to have. That's also something I carry around with me and I use that every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, like, you also mentioned digital nomads, and I know that they are like quite an issue at the moment in certain Southeast Asian and other countries around the world. I mean, you know more about this than me. Like, what's your take on that? Like, it could be to do with plastic or could be to do with anything. I know you've talked about it recently as well.
Yeah, the digital nomads. I mean, I wouldn't, of course, I don't want to say it's only the digital nomads. I feel like, of course, also there's also a lot of foreigners actually living in certain places, right?
Yeah.
And I personally don't like to call, I think I don't know why people call them expats. Like I would just say, well, it's a foreigner living in another country. But anyway, the expat is the term that a lot of people use. So I think I mean, there's so many different issues, right? The plastic or the waste production due to the all the deliveries, I feel like it's a huge issue. The unawareness that they are a part of the problem,
Mm,
right? Like perhaps complaining about the trash and everything on Bali, if we take Bali as an example. But then also this whole crazy construction that's happening right now, or it's been happening. I feel like ever since COVID
mm,
kind of ended, that's when everything exploded, at least on Bali, but I think also in other places in the world.
mm,
And I feel like it's not even ending. Like there is like an endless construction and it's just continuing up the coast. And also that produces a lot of trash, right? Like all this, there's probably a lot of trash like or waste produced from like construction and it causes air pollution. Like I remember when I went to Bali last year and I went to the south for like a 1 week and then I said I can't do this
mm,
because there were so many trucks driving around, like these construction trucks and bringing in sand, cement, whatever they carry around. But, it creates so many like dust particles, which
mm,
is probably not microplastic, but it's like other kind of pollutants.
mm.
Pollutants? Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's the word.
it is.
That that you breathe in the entire time. It's not just the foreigners living there. The locals also have to breathe that in every single day. And again, if we take Bali as an example, there's also so much traffic now.
Mm,
So the traffic has an effect on probably the stress levels, your mental health, but
mm,
then also creating like really polluted air. So I think there's different factors that make it in a way quite unlivable. I sometimes don't understand why people if I talk about foreigners, why they hype living in the south of Bali so much, and they're all like in the wellness space and
Hmm.
so much about like healthy living, where I'm like, have you ever looked at like the air pollution and like the air quality? I'm like obsessed with air quality ever since I live here because it is a big factor. Like depends where you are and depending on the year, like when in the year, like the air is quite polluted in certain areas. So
Yeah. And this is a
yeah,
problem not just for the people who've moved in, but obviously for the people
yeah,
whose
it
home it is,
is.
like who were living there originally, like they now have to deal with that kind of overspill. And then economically it's very difficult for them as well because their prices kind of bump up to meet foreign prices, like the immigrants that are coming in to live there, like that usually, well, I guess in other countries, like it would maybe be immigrants coming in because of like refugee status, that kind of thing. But the bulk of the immigrants who are coming into Bali, Thailand, wherever, are moving there simply because they want to. And this, as we've said, does bring benefits, but when you're cramming like so many people into a very small space, it also has disadvantages. And then the prices go up, like maybe because people are willing to spend more, maybe because of just like demand for goods. So then people like, vendors put their prices up and this kind of thing. And it must be very hard to just be a person living in that situation and suddenly be overrun.
To be honest, it must be so difficult for the majority of the local people living on, let's say, let's take Bali again. Like, I mean, of course, there's probably also local investors
Mhm.
and who are benefiting a lot from this massive development that's been happening.
Yeah,
But I feel like the majority, and also with my post that I put out last week, I
yeah,
had a bunch of locals from like very different regions also commenting, and they all kind of said the same thing. Like we don't want this. Like we don't want such massive development. The nature is disappearing. The air pollution is a big problem. The traffic is a big problem. The prices are, I think the prices is like the biggest issue that they are pushed out of their own communities.
mm,
And also, if I think about the south of Lombok, I mean, Lombok is still very undeveloped, but it is also developing because it's a gorgeous island, has incredible beaches. So of course, there's big investors who see huge opportunities, and there's a demand from the digital nomads. They all want their one bedroom villa. So there's a lot of villas being built. But then I've had talks with locals who said, like, well, we moved out of here. We moved away from Kuta because it's also not the same anymore. I feel like in a place like Lombok, actually, there's even more of a culture clash because the majority of Indonesia is Muslim, Lombok included. And then you have, women wearing hijabs and, the people are very religious on Lombok. And then you have a bunch of young tourists or digital nomads who come in, and I see the stereotypes. I feel like the stereotype from Bali is coming over to Kuta and Lombok also. And I feel like they're just so disrespectful. Like,
mm,
they even put signs now when I was just there a month ago with like, please put on some clothes. Like,
yeah,
it's unbelievable that people don't get it. Like they see there's mosques, they see the locals, they go for the prayers, the women wearing hijabs, they're completely covered. But then you have so many tourists, nomads, whoever, foreigners who just sit on their scooters without a shirt, if it's a
yeah,
guy, or with their bikinis. And I'm like, how can you not see that this is so against the entire culture of the people living here and that they must feel uncomfortable
mm.
if they see all these young girls, with their bikinis
Yeah, and
riding through town on their scooters.
it's wild. Like in Stone Town in Zanzibar, there's a community of men who live in like the center of Stone Town, in the old capital. So it's like very touristy. And there's a sign up that basically says like, please don't walk through this square with your bikinis on, like because it's Muslim men. Um, not only just with no bikinis, I forget the exact wording of the sign, but it's to the effect of put your clothes on, like you said. And last time I was there, I heard a girl wearing a very skimpy outfit walk past and say, "That's a bit rude." And I was like, "Are you actually joking?" Like, I mean, the mind boggles at the ignorance. Like, it's just wild that people think that they are more entitled to follow like their own rules than the rules of a country that they are visiting. Like, you might not be religious, you might not be Muslim, but you're visiting an Islamic country. You've chosen to go there. And therefore, like, you owe them some respect. You wouldn't walk into someone's house with your shoes on and trample mud through it. It's the same thing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I sometimes I sometimes feel like if I think about Germany and there's so many rules in Germany, it's like full of rules and then people come to countries in Southeast Asia and they feel, I mean, of course there's a lot of freedom here and I think that also why it attracts a lot of people from Europe specifically. But then just because there's maybe not that many rules like from home, then please at least go with the rules that exist. And
Yeah,
like it's with the shirts and the restaurants, for example. Like, I mean, nobody in Germany would go topless into a restaurant, but then in Thailand it's totally fine, or on Bali or anywhere else. It's like they kind of just leave their whole like manners and behaviors like at home where they're from. Or yeah, riding scooters. I never understand this whole no shirt, no helmet, no shoes. It's just like, yeah, probably it feels so free and amazing to ride on a scooter. I mean, despite that it's extremely dangerous to drive like that. That's a whole other thing.
yeah,
But
it is.
it's just strange. Yeah.
It is. And I mean, we all know people who've had scooter accidents in Southeast Asia. And interestingly enough, they probably haven't had them in other parts of the world to the same extent because they do follow certain rules of the road, like putting a helmet on and wearing a shirt. Like it's, yeah. Anyway, so my penultimate question, Eva, is what does sustainable travel mean to you? As you know, I ask everybody this and they always give me different answers. But yeah, what does it mean to you, that phrase?
To me, it means diving into local culture and really be open-minded for any country that you're visiting. I mean, because I know, of course, there's the ecological factor about sustainability, but for me, especially in the travel world, I feel like it's all about being open-minded, learning about the culture, meeting locals, and just, speaking with them and understanding where they're coming from, how they grew up, like how it is for them to live in their country and actually the country you're visiting and you're a visitor in, and just be a responsible traveler and like think about a few things when you travel and don't just go and shut off everything in your brain and just do whatever you want just because you think it's okay.
Mm,
Yeah.
definitely. I think that what you said is a very like big facet of what I think it is responsible travel. And like for me, the more I travel, the more I speak to people about this topic, the more I think it's like every country has its own issues. Every area of the world and even like regions within countries have their own issues. And a kind of our job as responsible travelers is to figure out what they are and how we can best help or mitigate or just like not contribute to them. And I think that does come from speaking to local communities and people and trying to understand their perspective. And also, isn't that the joy of travel, like to learn something about a different culture that isn't your own?
For sure. I mean, that's what made me interested in the first place when I first came to Thailand and just really seeing something completely different. I just got so curious about it and completely fell in love and ended up coming here over and over again. And now I live over here. And yeah, I think it really is about being open-minded and going there with an open heart to just discover and don't just go there to, sit in a beach club and eat your smoothie bowls and drink cocktails. I mean, that can be part of it, right? I mean, I sometimes also go eat a smoothie bowl or an avocado toast. But, I feel like it's the mix that makes it. You can have some of course, like wanting to have a nice experience as well, like being in a beach club or whatever you like. But then also really going deep into learning about the culture and seeing how people live.
Yeah, totally. You don't have to give up being
Yeah.
you. You can do what
No.
you like, but also do those things too. Yeah. And do you have anything else that you want to add to this topic, either plastic pollution or anything else, just before we wrap up the show?
I wanted to mention a few really cool projects, if that's okay, that are so on Bali, there's like I think one of the biggest projects on Bali is called Sungai Watch. I hope I
Mhm.
pronounced that right. And
Mhm.
it's these three siblings who really made it a big mission to clean up the rivers. And I know they're now extending also to Java. So you have Bali, and then next to it is Java, and Java is the most populated island in Indonesia.
Mhm.
And yeah, they go and clean up the rivers and then they create furniture out of it. And I think they
Amazing.
do it on a fairly larger scale now because they've been out there for a long time. And now there's on Lombok, there's also a small project that just started this year. It's called Honest Made. And they also collect all the plastic in the region. I mean, now they only do it in the south of Lombok. And they also make modular furniture, which I think is amazing. Like they create chairs and tables and like because it's a surf area, so they create like surf racks. And I think it's amazing there's more and more smaller projects popping up that hopefully will be bigger at some point and create even more impact in
Yeah.
the region or on that specific island in the case of Indonesia.
Yeah, definitely. And working together, like in projects like that, is what snowballs and what makes change. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. What are you working on at the moment, and where can people find you?
So people can find me on Instagram under Eva and the Planet and also on my website, so which is evaandtheplanet.com. Currently, I'm offering a group trip to Lombok, which is all about local culture and responsible, sustainable travel. It's a mix of like amazing local projects who, yeah, have local businesses, but then also conservation projects. So I feel like it's the perfect mix of the two different worlds. And then actually on Saturday, I'm going over to Sri Lanka to scout for another group trip that will be launched probably later in the year to, yeah, just check the hotels and all the amazing businesses that I found online. I'm excited to, yeah, to meet up with them and check them out.
Awesome. Well, this has been the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at the Sustainable Travel Podcast. And if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.